This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman.
This is Kid Shriner, the voice of the Green Arrow. And you are listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
The original Justice League has become a memory.
I am resigning from the Justice League.
What's going to happen to the League now?
We rebuild. From the ashes of that great conflict, a new team has arisen. A much, much bigger team.
Each of you brings something different to the table.
Old friends, new heroes. And as usual, plenty of bad guys jumping up to get beat down.
Calm down, and I'll let you go.
How about you kiss my ass?
Watch out, evildoers. There's nowhere to run. Because this year, they're all around you. The League is unlimited. An all-new original series, starring every superhero worth cheering for. And then some. Justice League Unlimited.
Where am I exactly?
Among friends.
There's strength in numbers.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 159 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, with me, my good friend, good brother, and the gentleman that runs our Twitter account. That's right, it is Liam. Liam, welcome to another week in Magic May, the month of magic.
That's right. We are nearing the end. Still got a couple weeks left here. And we flashed back forward. We were in the original Justice League series last week. And this week we have the direct sort of successor and sequel to that pair of episodes. But it also is a pretty darn important episode in the whole series, as now features the return of Hawkgirl.
That is right. Hawkgirl making her way back. We briefly saw her in the episode The Return that we covered in the archives at DCAUreview.com, a part of our Green Lantern month last year. You can check that out in the archives if you'd like to. But we really have kind of been left to guess what had happened to her at the end of the star-crossed phenomenon, which we also covered back in the archives at DCAUreview.com on episode 100. So if you haven't caught up on those, we advise you to check those out. But we kind of get the next installment of what happens to Shayera Hall here. We get some continuation of the Green Lantern Hawkgirl. Is there a cutesy relationship nickname for Green Lantern and Hawkgirl?
Not that I'm aware of. You gotta
no Hawk Lantern or Green Girl or
green Hawk. Yeah, something like that.
That's probably why they haven't done it, because neither of those are very good. It's
I
not
feel
one.
like Hawk Lantern is all right, although
Hawk Lantern's pretty good. Yeah,
sounds like a name of a fake newscaster in an Anchorman sequel.
Hawk Lantern with the 7:00 news. Anyway, before we dig into this week's plot and story, Liam, as we continue here in Magic May, let us get the official IMDb synopsis, not brought to you by imdb.com, but it could be. So this episode, Wake the Dead, as you mentioned, originally aired back on the Cartoon Network, a part of Justice League Unlimited, back on December the 18th, 2004, meaning we're coming up here on the 17-year anniversary of this here episode's debut.
Right, and this is for the episode Wake the Dead, which was written by Dwayne McDuffie and Bruce Timm, directed by Joaquin DeSantos, with music by Lolita Redmanis, and animation by DR Movie Company. And that synopsis reads as such. A trio of high school kids accidentally resurrect Solomon Grundy, reviving him more powerful than ever, but with no memories of his past. Dr. Fate, Amazo, Aquaman, and Shayera assist League regulars in stopping his rampage.
It's a little wordy, I think. That transition statement also was a little rough, but it was all right.
Kind of buried the lead, too. I think... Yeah. Like, oh, by the way, Hawkgirl's in this.
That's right. Well, might as well, Liam. We'll jump into discussing the plot here. So we open up on what is an interesting visual we'll talk about in just a moment, probably interesting more, but we three nameless teenagers who are doing what else they would do on a random evening, and that is, of course, trying to call upon the spirits through what we learn later is known as chaos magic.
Yeah, so this is interesting. There is a forum post from Bruce Timm, which I think you can find if you use a Wayback Machine. But he mentioned at the time, he made some allusion to, would this episode have been better if Ra's al Ghul was in it? Which I haven't seen anything that says officially there was a draft with him in it and they had to take him out. I think that was just maybe a reference, but it is weird that the crux of this episode is three random teenagers apparently, as we get some exposition, bought a book of spells on the internet and resurrect, one of the most powerful foes the Justice League has ever fought. So it's weird that my only thought is that if they had used another supervillain to resurrect him, that they then would have felt like they had to wrap up that. And since it was only a 22-minute episode, they're just like, all right, some random kids do it, and then he kills the kids.
Right.
But that's that loose end tied up. Now we just have to have them fight Grundy.
Yeah, there's a lot of murder and a lot of intrigue in this episode. I'll say that. So these kids perform this seance. One of the kids is swearing revenge against a bully, and they want this power to make them stronger. Through the incantation and the reciting, they bring some sort of spirit out, but then one of the kids backs over the chalk line, disrupting the spirit and forcing him to go back. But in the meantime, little do they know, as you mentioned, they resurrected Solomon Grundy. Grundy, we learn later on in the episode, is just the form. He no longer has the memories. He is a zombie. He's a literal zombie at that point. And there's even some talk between some of the characters later on. If isn't that what a zombie generally is a living dead person without a brain. So even more so, though, gone is any ability for Grundy to communicate or for him to comprehend anything. He's simply a mindless, rampaging beast. And he is it's the opening scene, though, is interesting because it's after the commercial or the introduction for the credits, and we see the untimely death of our three nameless teenagers. The implied deaths of them. We flash to a familiar place that we've seen several times here in the month of May, Liam, the month of magic, and that is Dr. Fate's tower. And we get the weirdest trio hanging out playing chess in Dr. Fate's tower.
It's your move, Hawkgirl. Check in 5 moves.
We'll see.
Diana told me you used to regularly beat Batman. Difficult to believe from the current pitiful level of your game. I should have known better than to expect a proper challenge from a woman. Such scintillating repartee. I'd get better conversation from the android.
You are aware I'm in the room?
Check. I win again. Huzzah.
It's just a game.
You disgust me.
Join the club.
Well, it is. I do beg the question, like, did Aquaman and Mira have a fight before this episode? Like, did she kick him out? Because why is Aquaman hanging out in this tower?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the intimation maybe, and this is drawing only based on the reaction that we have. So Shaira is playing Aquaman in chess while Amazo looks on, and Aquaman is doing his very best to taunt Shayera to sort of get a rise out of her. It's very, very clear. He makes a comment about not being surprised that it's so easy to defeat a woman. He then makes even further slights of comments, saying how he was told that she used to beat Batman in chess when she was a member of the League, and he can't believe that this is what she's sunk to. He's clearly trying to get a rise out of her. He comments on that she's not willing to give an inch. She's not really responding at all. She doesn't even look twice. He keeps taunting her, saying he's about to beat her, and ultimately does, and feels dissatisfied. And then Dr. Fate comes up and tells him, hey, I told you that wasn't going to work. So it seems to me maybe Dr. Fate tried to, I think it's more hilarious to think that Mira kicked him out for something, or was like, hey, can you please go to the surface? You're getting on my nerves. I need to clean the house. Like, your son is like screaming and crying already. Like, can you just go to the surface? I need some alone time. Please just leave me alone. We'll get a babysitter. You go to the surface. I'll hang out in here. I'll do some cleanup and put on some tea and watch my soaps. Please go to the surface. That makes it much more funny. But
that's definitely my headcanon for the episode.
I love that. But the interesting thing is, it seems that Shayera has this defeatist attitude, and there's even a line that he says to her. He says, you disgust me. He says that directly to her, and she says, join the club. So she's clearly very self-defeated. She's down in the dumps a little bit still over this whole everything that happened with her and everything that she chose to do, and filled with regret for everything that she had done.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the crux of the episode from there. Obviously, there's the Justice League proper, meantime, is fighting this mindless Grundy. Green Lantern, we see Jon Stewart at a fashion show, and we quickly get introduced to his new love interest, that being Vixen. And then those two, along with Superman, are sort of battling Grundy. But the B plot to it, and really the main focus of this episode is, and we see it when Shayera goes into the garden with Inza, when she's kind of moping. She talks about she was stripped of her title in the Thanagarian army. She was banished from her home world for not going through with the whole genocide plan. And so she no longer has that identity. She feels that because she was always this sort of double agent, that Hawkgirl itself was a lie. So she doesn't feel she can be her. She can't be the superhero she was sort of pretending to be, nor can she be the soldier that she always was before. And so she's really feeling like a woman without a country, so to speak. And it's sort of seeing Grundy, who she had this connection with, is finally enough to sort of bring her at least temporarily out of the funk. And then her experiences for the rest of the episode sort of reinforce that she does still have an ability to do good. And we'll get to that more towards the end there. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of punching. It's a lot of Green Lantern fights Grundy, gets beat up. Vixen fights Grundy, gets beat up. And obviously we'll have a lot to talk about visuals. Superman shows up, gets beat up by Grundy. Dr. Fate, Aquaman, Hawkgirl, and Amazo come. They try to defeat Grundy. Amazo discovers that Grundy is somehow, because I guess however this chaos magic that they keep referring to, he's become so powerful that he can actually absorb the power that Amazo is hitting him with. And so Amazo actually has to sort of recuse himself from battle.
I'm sorry. I sense nothing of the Grundy we know within that shell. He has nothing but rage.
Then it is time I brought this to an end.
No! Don't hurt him!
In my travels through space, I've attained mastery of forces all but incomprehensible to humans. Wait. Something's wrong. The creature is somehow feeding on my energies. He adds my power to his own. My presence here puts you all at risk. I will retreat several light years distance until I can determine how to counter this effect.
I didn't like that at all. I thought that was such a weak plot device to get this overpowered character off of the screen, which to me, it would have made more sense if there's a throwaway line that Superman has when Amazo shows up. He says to Dr. Fate, "Oh, we're letting him out of the tower now." And Dr. Fate says, "Well, I figured we'd give him a try." He says, I'd like to have seen you stop him or something like that. Yes. And which, okay, that's cute, but you could have just as easily had written something like, "Hey, Amazo, I don't think you're quite ready yet. We need you to stay here." Or should we fail, we need someone to be there, and with the ability to stop him if our diplomacy fails or something like that. But bringing him into the battle and then having him just run away like, "Oh no, I've been defeated. I must peace out 2 parsecs away." Like, all right, cool, man, whatever.
So going a little behind the scenes there, I don't know if we've talked about it on our show yet, but there's a comic book coming out soon called Justice League Infinity that looks to act as another season of the show, similarly to the Adventures Continue has done for the new Batman adventures. And that book is going to feature Amazo. And I do wonder, and I know that there was that James Tucker has said before, he's actually told us directly on Twitter that there were sort of some vague ideas for a 4th season of Justice League Unlimited that was going to take place in space, and maybe Amazo was going to be involved. So I wonder if they already had that inkling, or if at least Dwayne McDuffie did, and maybe was sprinkling that in here as like, well, I have this idea for Amazo out in space, or we have this idea for Amazo out in space at some point as like a Silver Surfer type. And so we need to, but yes, for the purposes of this episode, he shows up, he fires like an and goes, "Oh, I can't help. See you guys," and leaves. It's pretty lame within the context of the episode. Also, we didn't know we were going to get a comic book 17 years later that might answer some of those questions that we had. But
absolutely, it's a retroactive Easter egg, as we say here, especially if, and that's sort of the illusion as we've read some of the previews, no confirmation yet, but seems like that, like you said, this comic book could delve into some of that, at which point, yeah, that will be nice. That'll be fine to kind of follow up on that, and that will make this feel much more impactful, other than just, we had to write this overpowered character off of the show as quickly as we could.
Yeah, but Hawkgirl's sort of reluctant to fight Grundy at first because of this bond that they shared, and because she doesn't really have this sense of heroism that she once had. But when both Green Lantern and Vixen are really kind of down and out, she finally takes action, and we discover once again that her nth metal mace is very, very powerful against the magic, or the magic infused beings such as Grundy is in this state. And she kind of just knocks him down into the sewers, just beats the crap out of him. And we kind of have this final little speech where the heroes are kind of arguing over what to do. And finally, Hawkgirl kind of steps up and says, "Okay, I'm going to go end this." And there's a very intentional reference to Old Yeller made. Yep. And he was my friend, so I'm going to be the one to end it. Like that's spoiler alert for an 80-year-old movie at this point. But yeah, that's how that movie ends.
Old Yeller spoilers ahead. Watch out, guys.
They shoot the dog. The kid shoots the dog. He had rabies. He didn't just shoot the dog for fun. But yeah, that's sort of, and we get this wrap up where there's sort of press and like a crowd is gathered and people are yelling insults at Shayera, and Green Lantern sort of rises to her defense, and we actually find out how exactly the original, or the surviving 6 members of the Justice League voted when it came to either keeping Hawkgirl or kicking her out. And we in fact find out that they actually had voted for her to stay. And so they sort of welcome her back into the League fold.
Hawkgirl, do you think today's act can possibly make up for your complicity in the Thanagarian invasion of Earth?
Do you have a comment on your dismissal from the Justice League?
Hawkgirl was never dismissed from the League. She can come back whenever she likes. I recused myself because, well, anyway, Superman broke the tie. I believe in second chances. I believe in redemption. But mostly, I believe in my friends.
Yeah, it was a nice moment because it actually highlighted Superman, who has a minor role throughout the episode. It's a lot of punching and fighting Grundy, but there are some comedic moments, including a moment where he gets hit into the harbor by Grundy, and he's climbing out of the harbor later on, and Green Lantern asks him if he's okay, and he literally just deadpan looks at him and says, "Do I look okay?"
Says, "What do you think?"
You okay?
Do I look okay?
Better than Grundy's about to.
It's tremendous. Well, yeah,
so good. But for Superman's minor role, with the occasional comedic line here and there, expertly written by, I think we mentioned this was written by Dwayne McDuffie, the late great Dwayne McDuffie, and Bruce Timm also had writing credit on this episode as well. But he is actually written at the end is to be the one. John Stewart lets Shira know that Superman was the one who broke the tie. So we do learn that there were 3 people that voted against her, or 2 people that voted against her coming back, but that Superman was the one to vote in favor of having her restored. And he gives this poignant little line that really speaks to the heart of who Superman is. And I know with your love for Superman as a character, and genuinely people who love and appreciate Superman, it speaks to the good of Superman's heart, of seeing people not only and allowing them to have second chances, which is what he says he believes in, but he also believes in his friends, and he very warmly welcomes Shira back. Which is interesting because she's having this identity crisis throughout this episode, pun intended if you're a DC fan, but she's having this identity crisis throughout this episode of who is she, what is her role now. She finally sort of re-embraces the role of Hawkgirl when she reaches out. She isn't the mace is not forced upon her. Dr. Fate very stoically gives her the choice. He says he had tucked the mace away in another dimension because of the effects that it has on the tower where he lives. But if she is ready, she can reach out and take the mace. So she literally physically has to reach out and take this mantle, as it were, the mantle of Hawkgirl again. And then, but she's still struggling with it, even as she goes out and tries to kind of deal with this idea that she is the person that's going to have to put Grundy to an end. She says, is this my role in life? Am I just a destroyer? Am I just somebody who destroys things? So there's a neat little moment that happens where there's a bridge that's collapsing, where she actually saves this mother and daughter whose car is flying off the bridge and headed for the water. She saves them, rips them out of the car and saves them. So as these people at the end are hurling these insults at her, people from the media, by the way, they didn't care. They're just like yelling at her and throwing stuff at her. And this woman comes up to her and thanks her personally for saving her. And it's sort of this redemptive moment where at that point, coupled with this speech that Superman and Green Lantern give her, it seems that she's taken that mantle back of being a hero. That she's back in the League, she's back where she belongs, and she kind of reassumes that identity that she had kind of been losing or unsure of for the better part of the episode.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like I said, there's a lot packed into this, and I guess we can begin to start talking about scores here. But because it's so packed, because you have to have the explanation for how Grundy came back. You have to reintroduce all of the Tower of Fate characters. You have to, because we saw, as you said, we saw Hawkgirl right at the end of the return and knew she was staying at the Tower of Fate, but we didn't really know what that meant, what she'd been doing. what kind of mental state she was in. So when we see her and she's so sort of lost and dejected, and then yes, as you mentioned, that interaction with the family, with the family on the bridge, who then sort of go up and grab her hand while she's being, yelled at and screamed at, and having that moment of sort of remembering that, hey, no matter your mistakes. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying about Superman. What Superman says is like, yes, no matter the mistakes that you've made, if you truly want to earn that forgiveness and to make things right, you can still help people, you can still make a difference in the world. And she, like you said, she begins to then take up that mantle of a hero again. And I think it's a really, really great sort of bow to that, and a great way to, it doesn't feel cheap to reintroduce her. It's not like, oh, well, she's just back, let's, a bad guy showed up and she shows up to help or whatever. It's like, no, it because of the deeply personal connection with the Grundy character that we discussed in the 2 episodes last week, it made sense to me that this would be what would get her out of the tower. And then to have this sort of deeply emotional experience with Grundy, but then also with this family, I think it's a pretty satisfying way to get Shaira back into the fold. So for all these reasons, I really enjoyed the episode. I thought they did a lot with obviously not as much time, only 22 minutes. So one parter here. So for all those reasons, I gave it a 9 out of 10 for plot.
Nice. Yeah, I gave it just a tick lower. I gave it 8 out of 10. I think the Amazo thing was really, really the only thing that I didn't need. Like, honestly, like that just sort of cheapened it a little bit. Especially with, again, if we had maybe had follow-up later on or something like that, it probably wouldn't have bothered me as much. But to have him written into it, have him then written out of it in a very weird way that is never really explained, that took it down just a little bit. But I agree with you. And what I love, and I think we oftentimes express it, but we try to give the credit when it's due, and it's definitely due when we mention it. But just in case we haven't, some of the brilliancy of Mr. McDuffie's writing was that he was able to weave these very deep, real life, like real thoughts and topics into these stories to humanize these larger than life heroes. And a lot of people try to do that. A lot of people try to humanize to varying degrees of success. And I feel like the fact that he was willing to take some of these themes, like this idea of having an identity crisis, of feeling like you are the mistakes that you made, that's so something that us as humans can relate to on an everyday level. I can't tell you how many times I think about the mistakes that I've made in my life and whether or not I'm defined by them. But the fact that he was able to write this cute little 22-minute quote unquote kids cartoon and sort of address that type of topic, and having people in Shaira's life that were able to rally around her and say, you know what, especially this little line from Superman, I believe in second chances. I believe that, everyone deserves a second chance. And I believe in my friends. Like, just the importance and the value of having amazing, supporting, loving friends and family, which not everybody can relate to. But when you have that and you're facing those type of identity crises, or you're like feeling like you're going to be defined by the mistakes that you've made in your past, there's nothing like having that one person that comes alongside you and goes, nah, man, that's not you. And the fact that Mr. McDuffie was able to write a great episode that really takes that theme and applies it to a children's cartoon and a character in the children's cartoon on this grander comic book stage. I just love that. I love the way that he's able to weave these very adult real life themes into these cartoons.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially as we will get to later down the line when we cover more of the Cadmus arc, but this version of Superman in particular knows all too well what it's like to lose the trust of the world.
For sure.
When he has the excuse of brainwashing, which not. Although again, you can make the argument because she didn't know the true scope of the Thanagarians' plans, that she isn't completely culpable for all of the terrible things that they did, but so he on a very personal level, I think it makes sense that Superman, beyond him just being Superman and him being true to who his character is at his core, this specific version of Superman has sort of dealt with a similar thing that Shayera is probably feeling, and the feeling of how do I earn back the trust of people who used to look up to me and are now terrified of me. And I think having that sort of weight on your shoulders, and you know, in the end of Superman and Legacy, we see that Superman kind of has Lois to rely on, and she tells him to kind of win them back one at a time. And I think that's kind of play here with Hawkgirl, and when she saves the lives of the mother and daughter, it's win them back one at a time. It's you can't change what you did in the past, but you can do everything you can to be better than you were yesterday. And I think that's what Superman is great at representing in comics. I think it's what a lot of these heroes are. It's not always about, it's not about being perfect in superheroes or in real life. It's
for sure.
It's just about, you know, it's about trying harder to be better the next day. And I think that's what this episode kind of represents.
I love it. Yep. Great writing from Mr. McDuffie. And as you said, to jam it all into a 22-minute episode, man, that's never easy to do, in my opinion. So amazing. Let's move on to our next category, Liam, which is going to be our visuals and animation category. So we have another episode of Justice League Unlimited here. So last one we covered was just a few weeks back when we covered this little piggy, which you can hear in the archives at DCAUreview.com.
What episode was that? I'm not familiar.
Well, it is in our top picks section, if you recall. So check that out if you're interested. If you're unable to find it, check out the top picks section. But right off the bat here, Liam, we have some interesting Easter eggs in the teenagers' room. There were a couple that I pulled out, a couple that you had mentioned also. What stood out for you as from the visual side of things?
Yeah, that dorm room is definitely one that if you're watching this on HBO Max or you have the Blu-rays or DVDs, you're definitely going to want to pause it, just kind of because as the episode as that scene plays out, you can kind of see something new in almost every shot. But we got the one I immediately noticed was there's a DVD case for a movie called Wicked Scary, which is actually a horror movie from the Teen Titans show. It actually plays into an episode in the second season where Raven, in her refusal to admit that a horror movie scared her, actually like unleashes the monster from the movie on the rest of the Titans. So I'm sure it was just a little bit of good Warner or DC animation synergy there, or maybe it was just a reused asset for a background or something, but I did think it was a cute reference to kind of throw in there. But there is, I'll let you handle a couple of them here. There's just a myriad of pop culture and other comic book companies' properties on display in this young man's room.
That's right. So I notated that there's a statue that is very, let's just say, Hellboy-like. I believe you said there was a nod to Swamp Thing in the background as well. Maybe the leader from the Hulk combined with who was the other, Doctor Strange or
Thanos. So he's Thanos covered. It's like a purple guy in like a blue and gold suit, but he has the big round leader head. So
very interesting. So I don't know did I miss any? Was there any more that we missed?
A couple of minor ones. There's one that's a Star Trek, looks like the Starfleet logo but turned upside down, and then there's a shield above the door that has the little Triforce logo on it from the three triangles from Legend of Zelda.
Okay, there you go.
There might be even more that I'm missing here, but those
do us a favor. If you caught any that we didn't, tweet Liam at DCAU Review on Twitter. Let us know any others that we may have missed, because there's lots to be seen there, as you said. I did want to say that the conversation between the kids talking about swirlies and wedgies, and then the one kid saying he doesn't wear underwear anymore because of the wedgies. I thought that did make me crack up.
That was pretty good. And just like the look on his on the other friend's face. Was the one kid like Jimmy Olsen's little brother?
Oh, that's
he's got the orange mullet. Like
he's wearing glasses. Yep. Could be. But yeah, lots of visual stuff that I had notated here. Beyond that, I think that way that the cold open or that intro ends very suddenly. There's a couple of real quick commercial breaks that kind of come out of nowhere. That one, the cut to the credits, the initial opening credits, is very sudden as a hand kind of breaks through the door and grabs the kid's head. It's Solomon Grundy's hand breaks through, and it just cuts right to the credits. I thought that was visually it's very horror movie-esque or something. It's like a jump scare almost, like the hand pops through and grabs the kid's head and then they cut to the next scene very quickly. But I thought that was done very well. You mentioned we have a scene where we are introduced to the Jon Stewart Vixen romance. So what's this? Is this like Glixen? What are we calling this? We have to have a name for it.
Yeah, it's hard because she doesn't have two names. She just has the one.
Right. So, I'm going with Glixen.
Green Vix. That might be trademarked by whoever owns NyQuil.
Yeah, I'm going with Glixen. So we're introduced to the Glixen romance, and so Jon Stewart in his street clothes, and then there's a quick transition that happens, some back and forth between her asking him if he's going to get ready because he says they have to leave this fashion show to go do Justice League business. And there's a quick transition where he pulls his ring down and he's in his Green Lantern suit. I thought that was awesome. Well, sticking with Jon Stewart, it seems that if you recall, we had mentioned several times that there was a lot of complaining going on message boards that Jon Stewart wasn't making enough constructs with his ring, which we explained away in a couple of our episodes is, John's more of a military guy, just get the job done. He's not here the artistic guy like Kyle is, so he doesn't need to use that imagination as much, but he does use a couple of different constructs here, including a hand to save some a bus, I think, that was launched towards a building, and then he uses sort of like a handcuff type thing to try and wrap Grundy up, or binder something. I don't know what it was exactly, but it was out of the normal. It wasn't just the bubbles and the laser blast that we usually see. I think other than that, I think there is a lot of visuals that go along with the Vixen character as she sort of manifests the powers of these different or the strengths of these different animals through the magical amulet that sits on her necklace. I thought those were pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so. I think, as we mentioned at the start there, this episode is directed by Joaquin DeSantos. And I feel like every time we review an episode of his, there's like one shot that is just so extra cool. And in this episode, to me, is when Grundy, like, I think it's when he breaks out of the clasp or whatever, and he just sends Green Lantern flying. Vixen, touches her helmet. She runs and does like a giant leap, flips over a police car that's kind of skidding and trying to brake to avoid hitting her. She flips up and like spins around on a light post and then jumps and leaps forward in the air, like grabs onto a wall for a second and hops off of that, and then catches Jon Stewart in midair and kind of does like a forward roll to avoid to hurting herself or him. So it's just extra little flourishes that I feel like we always get when and so far it seems like every time I'm like, oh, that's really good, I wonder who directed this one. It's the answer has been Mr. DeSantos each time. So there's definitely he definitely seemed to like to put a little extra flourish, and credit to the animation company DR Movie Co. for being able to pull that off as well. But yeah, I really like the Vixen stuff. You spoke about how this is kind of a more violent episode. At one point, she's kind of like slammed into the side of a fence, and her arm is very clearly broken. And she uses her power to, I guess, take on the form of some kind of lizard or something that can heal itself, and kind of snaps her arm back into place. So I don't think we get any blood in this episode, but everybody kind of has a lot of like costume tearing and like
there's even a shot
lines on their faces to sort of indicate like cuts and scuff marks and stuff.
For sure. There's even a shot. So later on in the battle, once Dr. Fate and co arrive, Aquaman shoots his hook and it actually goes through Grundy's arm. Like it pierces right through Grundy's arm. There's no blood or, muscle tear or anything shown, but it definitely penetrates right through his arm and hits through the wall. And then you see him trying to kind of like pull the hook out from the other side. So it definitely a very violent episode. It's funny though that you mentioned that very dynamic and certainly sort of over the top visual with Vixen, because I think there was actually a couple subtle things too. So we don't get it played out on this episode verbally, but there are some sort of hints that Vixen knows or suspects there's a little bit of history between Shayera and John. There's some subtle jealous looks that she gives, including the scene where Shayera is about to is sort of discussing what her role is and whether or not she's going to have to kill Grundy. And John volunteers he's going to go do it. He just, he tells her he'll take the mace and he'll go do it. And it's subtle, but if you look in the background, Vixen is standing there with her arms folded across her chest, kind of giving John the stink eye.
Is this my destiny? To be a destroyer? To betray yet another friend?
It's not that simple. It never was.
Hey, how about we discuss it for another couple of hours? That way he's sure to escape.
Only you have the power to put that creature out of its misery and to stop it before it hurts anyone else.
You don't have to, Shayera. I'll do it for you. Give me the mace.
Forget it, John. He was my friend. It's my responsibility. I'll do it myself.
And I love that because it's not verbally addressed in this episode that she either knows anything or that she's jealous. But the fact that they subtly slipped in those little looks from her to kind of be like, yeah, she knows that. And we don't know. Does she know that they had a history? Is she onto it? Is she trying to figure it out? We don't get any of that information in this episode. So just those little subtle things in the background to know that she's kind of sniffing around and seeing that there's something here between the two of them. And she doesn't like the fact that Shayera kind of has her eye on her man.
Yeah, there's definitely, you definitely get that sense. We'll certainly talk about that in voice acting a little bit later. But yeah, there's some very good, as you said, sort of non-verbal stuff that's just totally body language in that scene. That's great and definitely very subtle, again, for a kid's cartoon. But yeah, other than that, like we said, lots of pun. There's some cool Justice League teamwork. Like there's a part where Grundy sort of has Vixen above his head and Hawkgirl strikes him with the mace and he kind of goes down, and then Superman flies at him with both fists and knocks him back, and Grundy drops Vixen, and of course Green Lantern's there to catch her from falling. It's just like, I felt like there's a couple nice bits there. Another bit where Vixen uses her claws to kind of slice up the base of a statue, and then we see Aquaman kind of shoulder block it from the other side and knock it over on Grundy. So that I thought they did some cool stuff with that. Speaking of Aquaman, I think maybe my favorite visual of the whole episode is, as you mentioned, Superman gets knocked by Grundy into the river, and as he does, he's knocked through one of the support legs of the bridge, and the bridge begins to shake, and the other leg begins to give and collapse, and then all of a sudden we see Aquaman slowly rise out of the water, and a giant octopus shows up to steady the support beams and keep the whole bridge from collapsing. I was like, that's a great Aquaman thing. So any of you youngsters who think Jason Momoa made Aquaman cool, he did, because he said my man. But also I thought Aquaman was so cool in this episode. I thought that's like the coolest intro or entry to a scene that I can remember a Justice League happening, at least in any DCAU episodes we've reviewed so far.
Yeah, that was definitely a solid A++ entry from the King of the Seas. I really did enjoy that. Last two visual nods that I'll mention, then I'll give my score. But one, so that same scene where they're sort of gathered around this hole in the street where Shayera has knocked Grundy deep into the sewers below. They're sort of gathered around it, having this discussion as to what they're going to do and whether or not they're going to have to kill this mindless zombie. There's some hashtag hair movement happening there. Lots of wind blowing. There are some capes blowing as well, but it's mostly shoulders up. So it's a lot of hair movement happening there. I did notate that. Some great animation there. And then I think another standout for me was as Shayera goes into the sewer after Grundy, she's sort of walking through the various sewer pathways, and she's using her mace and the electricity from her mace to light her way. And there's this great shadow work that's done. Really great shadow work that's done. So that I thought was really great. And then the visual at the end, even it's coupled, and we'll talk about it when we get into our voice acting, but coupled where she finds Grundy and he's worn out, and Grundy looks a little bit different. He has these giant red eyes, and he has this like kind of more disheveled, longer hair than we last saw him with. But his eyes open and they sort of turn angry, and she's talking to him and trying to calm him down. And she tells him to close his eyes, and he does. And it's done very slowly. It's almost slow motion. He closes his eyes, and then they cut away, and you don't hear anything. You don't see anything. You just see, it's just nothing. And then Hawkgirl flies out from underneath the from the sewers, and that's where we get sort of our finale happening there. But it's done very, very well. Very sweet way. I think it's not the same as the way that last week's episode, not as cute and not as warm and fuzzy, but still that bit of tragedy still underlying there, as she ultimately has to do this to somebody that sacrificed himself for her, even though it's not really the same person anymore. So really, really great visuals there. I thought it was very strong throughout the episode. The action scenes were good. There was some downtime and a little bit of people just kind of standing around, so it wasn't completely full with action, but I still think it's a pretty strong episode. So I went with a score of 8 out of 10 for visuals. What about you?
Yeah, I went with the exact same score, actually, of 8 out of 10. Yeah, a lot of really good stuff in this episode. The only other thing I'll mention is you kind of touched on it. The design of Grundy is changed, not dramatically, but like the hair's a little like more shaggy, and he has those eyes, and then I feel like in his face they made his face a bit rounder, and I don't know if that was an intentional choice or just the animation or the storyboard artists. But it made him, as a result, I thought, look more like a gorilla, like a more animalistic, which I think works for kind of what this version of Grundy is supposed to be. So I actually think that whether or not that was an intentional change in his design, or if he was just a little bit off model, I'm not 100% sure. But either way, I thought it worked pretty well. And there's a scene there where, again, Shayera's sort of still conflicted about really kind of going in on him, and she turns back and looks at him, and he's just got all this drool coming out of his mouth, and he's just full of this rage, and she finally takes this big dramatic swing and knocks him into the ground. So yes, definitely some very strong visuals all around this week.
Agreed. All right, Lane, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And I believe you said Lolita Ritmanis from the Dynamic Music Partners was credited with the music for this week's episode. What stood out for you as far as musical notes?
Yeah, I didn't have a ton for music this week. I definitely think the action beats are pretty well covered by our sort of classic Justice League rock battle themes. But the biggest music note I had was actually for the scene we already talked about, that entrance of Aquaman. We get the return again of that Aquaman theme that we talked about last week, and this time played with more rocked up, as a lot of the music in JLU was.
Shayera?
Hate the beard.
But I think that really the music as his theme plays begins, and then as sort of Hawkgirl shows up as well to save the falling thing, and they sort of transition into a little bit of the kind of GL Hawkgirl theme that we heard in Wild Cards and in Starcross as well, there as they sort of come back face to face. I thought there's some good callbacks, to be sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's interesting. The scene initially where Grundy is sort of doing battle with the Green Lantern and Vixen. There's sort of this waiting period where we wait for Superman to show up, and we don't know that he's coming because he hasn't been introduced yet. But Green Lantern and Vixen are kind of backed into a corner, and Grundy is bearing down on him. And it was interesting because I thought I was listening to the music. And it sounded, and again, this is not music that I'm aware of that's been released available for us to listen to kind of break it down in more isolation. So it's hard because you have all these sound effects over top of it. And but it sort of reminded me of like a 1990s Super Nintendo like boss battle soundtrack. Like it's like the characters bearing down on them, and it's just kind of like, it just sounded like sort of generic, like, oh, this could have been played in a video game for a boss battle, like which it's kind of fitting, like that's kind of what was happening, so it kind of fit the scene. I was a little disappointed that when Superman shows up, there is sort of this emphatic triumphant music that's played, but it didn't sound like the Superman Shirley Walker theme to me. At least there was a lot of sound effects and stuff layered over top of it, but from my ears it did not sound like Superman's theme. Did you catch that?
Yeah, I that's a good way of putting it. But yeah, I didn't really hear the classic the Shirley Walker theme at all. So yeah, like I said, I did think they brought in some sort of past musical themes for Aquaman, and a little bit for Hawkgirl when she sort of makes her return, but a lot of it more felt like it was sort of holding back a bit more, maybe to let the action and then later on the voice performances that we'll get to in a minute kind of shine. But all things considered, I still thought music was a solid outing. Certainly nothing wrong with it, and I ended up with a 6 out of 10 for music.
Yeah, I went, I think, solely for that Aquaman because it actually it goes beyond just the little intro. It plays a little bit longer than normal, but I loved that it coupled with the visuals, that musical note I thought was really, really great and sort of carried the rest of the episode for me. It's amazing what just like one little moment could. With that said, I mean, I only gave it a point higher. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I feel like they could have incorporated that Superman theme when he comes in there and sort of saves Green Lantern and Vixen from being smashed. I think that would have kind of given a more emphatic exclamation point to that scene. By the way, we had some conjecture earlier this week on our Instagram, and I think Twitter maybe, but do you think Superman was a little bit careless with his introduction there and slamming Grundy through multiple cars and causing a giant explosion? Is that a Man of Steel moment there for our DCAU Superman?
A little bit. I mean, I think he knocks him through the one truck, but he knocks him through like the trailer part of it. So like you can make the argument he didn't kill anybody with that punch, but when that was a really big explosion. And it's a little hard to believe that like nobody was in the area.
Yeah, so, maybe they all just went to the hospital with like, third-degree burns.
Hope so.
Yeah, but yeah, all right. Moving on to our final category for this week, Liam. That is going to be our voice actors. We have a pretty big cast, all things considered, here for a 22-minute episode. Some returning folks, some names that we'll recognize from previous episodes that we've discussed this month. But let's talk about today's voice cast.
Yeah, we got like you said, a lot of the same voices we've talked about either earlier this month or in previous episodes. But we will mention doing the Grundy growls is in fact Bruce Timm, who also voices one of the nerdy kids in the dorm room, along with George Newbern and Phil Lamar voicing the other two, I believe. But we have Jennifer Hale as Inza. We have Oded Fier returning as Dr. Fate. He's more of an exposition dump guy this week, because then right after Amazo's powers don't work, he's like, oh, by the way, mine don't work either.
I'm no good. He did say chaos magic a few different times, and I did appreciate that was just a term that they decided to come up with that didn't make it doesn't mean anything. It's just a phrase that they used. Mm-hmm. But he delivered the line very well. I appreciated it.
I don't see him. Neither do I. There must be lead in those old sewer pipes.
Guy tends to leave a trail. We'll find him, and then Pretty Polly can bash him with her magic mace.
Why does it hurt him?
It's made of nth metal. Your people's technology was developed specifically to repel magical creatures. It disrupts the magic that animates him. The creature knows only rage and seeks only oblivion. Your mace may be the one object on Earth that can grant him peace.
Yeah, for sure. He does. He does his job. He just didn't have much to do besides, to do the exposition stuff. But we do have Scott Rummel returning as Aquaman, and it's funny you mentioned there that I think his time to shine is definitely those opening couple minutes in the Tower of Fate, where he's so trying to get a rise out of Hawkgirl and is insulting her and trying to get her to find her warrior spirit. I think he's pretty entertaining once again in that role.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's not a lot, and we talked about it last week that he has a very stoic one-note delivery for most of his lines. He does have to show a little bit of emotion as he's frustrated. So I think that stoic sort of emotionless one-note type of delivery actually comes across. He's able to at least emote that he's upset, that he's angry or frustrated. And there's a cute little scene where they cut back to him playing chess against Amazo, and Amazo is congratulating him on only taking 12 moves this time instead of 6 the previous time for him to beat him. So there was some good back and forth between the two of them there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's some good fun there. With Robert Picardo as Amazo, also he gets a couple funny lines in that opening bit. But then, other than our main Justice Leaguers, who we'll talk about in just a moment, we have the first appearance of Gina Torres as Vixen, who folks might know from The Matrix or the show Suits, or like she has a lot of credits in her IMDb. So she's been in a lot of stuff. She's definitely one of those actresses that if you saw a picture, you'd be like, oh, yep, I've seen her in something. So yeah, that was I think she does a solid job, except she doesn't have a lot to do with this episode. She has more sort of to do in certainly in the third season. But I think it's a solid outing for her first appearance here.
Yeah, she's fine. There were some times where I felt like she was a little bit too flat on some of the deliveries that could have emoted a little bit more excitement, especially she's saving. She has to save a couple people during that whole bridge collapse scene, and when Grundy's or maybe it's the initial scene where Grundy's sort of rampaging, and she has to save some people, and it comes across as just the same sort of delivery that she gave when she she saw that John was coming to pick her up after the fashion show. So not super strong, but we know that there's more opportunities for her to shine a little bit better, and some of it could just be that she wasn't given a whole lot for this episode, so I won't hold it against her for sure.
Yeah, and then we have our three main original Justice Leaguers here. We have, as you mentioned, doesn't have a ton to do, but we have George Newbern as Superman. But as we've talked about in great detail already, that final bit at the end is some real good stuff, and he does a great job of delivering those lines. And then we have Phil Lamar as Green Lantern. Who obviously we've seen him a few times in the series so far in episodes we reviewed, but this one again we get a lot more like sort of personal stuff about John in this episode. Not only just that he has a new relationship, but sort of his reaction to seeing Shaira return, and to his he's sort of exasperated and a little bit excited, and then when she's sort of unsure if she can handle as she says, betraying another friend in Grundy, he's sort of very, very quickly is willing to kind of offer to take it up. So I think Phil Lamar, maybe other than Maria Canals as Hawkgirl, those two definitely have the most heavy lifting to do, like from an acting capital A acting standpoint this week.
Yeah, I agree, and I think this is another strong outing for the most part for Miss Canals, and I think we always talk about how great Phil Lamar is. There's no doubt that this is it's not a lot that he has to convey, but some of it is him coming to the defense of Hawkgirl as these members of the media try to berate her and try to kind of drag her down a little bit right after this already difficult moment that she's had, sticking a microphone in her face and demanding to know if she's sorry for what happened and all of that, and then immediately turning on her and beginning hurling insults at her. So John gets to show Mr. Lamar gets to give a pretty strong range of emotions, some shock, some anger, some frustration with the people that are condemning her, and so he does a great job. And then Miss Canals ultimately has to carry the emotional parts of the episode, and her range again of this sort of defeated, sad sack of a character at the beginning, where she's just sort of depressed and down and doesn't like herself, and struggling again, as we mentioned it already, sort of with her self-identity and who she is and who she's going to be going forward, and then sort of coming out of that a little bit at the end as she has that interaction with George Newbern's Superman. So I think it's a very strong performance. I think for the most part, I think everybody does a really, really good job. I think Vixen brought it down just a hair for me, just nitpicking, which is what we do here. But I ended up giving voice acting still a very strong 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I was a tick lower. I went 8 out of 10. Still a very good episode. I definitely think favorite interaction, just because it feels so natural, I think, is when the contrasting emotions when John sees Shaira for the first time, and he's sort of awestruck and he can barely speak, and then Hawkgirl just looks at him and goes, "Hate the beard," and then we're sort of off to the races from there. And obviously, like we said, Phil do a lot more towards the end of the episode, both in his conversation where he offers to sort of end things and for Shaira, and sort of sticking up for her in front of the media and everything. So and being the one to sort of remind her that while she might deserve she makes a comment about how she feels like she deserves the scorn that people have for her, but then when the mother and the daughter say walk up there, grab her hand and thank her, John's there to remind her that she also deserves that. So I think those two especially a pretty darn great job this week.
Traitor!
Go back!
Yeah, what are you gonna do? You gonna freeze the
Back off! She doesn't have to take that from you people!
Yes, I do. But it's okay. I guess I deserve some of it.
You saved our lives. God bless you, Chicalcon.
You deserve that, too.
Yeah, I agree. And that shows in our scores. So, all right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap things up. So let's total up our scores here. And totaling everything up for today, I ended up with a pretty strong 32 out of 40 for this week's episode. What about you?
Yeah, and I am just a 1 point different this week, as I am at 31 out of 40.
Right. Well, Liam, as we talk about each and every week, once we get to the end of the episode, we will talk about what we refer to as rewatchability. We grade this typically in a couple of different scales here. It's certainly importance to the DCAU storytelling as a whole. Sometimes it's just, hey, is this a pivotal episode that if you had the choice to sit somebody down and say, hey, I'm going to show you the best of the best, and this, would that be considered, while this wouldn't necessarily fall in our top pick section, would this be one that you say, yeah, I'd show this to somebody, be like, hey, this is great storytelling? So with that in mind, and that fully explained once again to our listeners, where do you fall on this rewatchability for this week's episode?
Oh, I think you gotta watch this one. Not only is it a direct sequel to a previous episode that I think we said was pretty important to the original Justice League series, but there's so many moving parts here, with not only the introduction of Vixen and her relationship with John, but I mean it's the return of Hawkgirl to the Justice League. So I think this is a no-brainer when it comes to rewatchability. And on top of it, if you want to look at it from the other end, I think it's also a good episode. We have good action. We have some really strong character moments for Hawkgirl especially. So yeah, I think this one gets 2 thumbs up from me for rewatchability.
I agree. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a must. As you said, it's pivotal to the storyline. We get the return of Hawkgirl. We get sort of the relaunch of her, as we'll see, coming back to the Justice League, which interestingly enough, we'll soon find out some of those, or the people that chose to vote against her in her return to the League, and some of those interactions as she tries to warm her way back up in the League when we get further down the road and review some more of those Justice League Unlimited episodes. But yeah, and it's a direct sequel to the episode that we covered last week, which we talked about as such a great episode when it comes to learning about who Shayera is, who Hawkgirl is at her core, why she is the way that she is about some things, and there's this correlation between the 2 episodes, a direct link, and so it's a good follow-up to that episode, as far as a development episode for Hawkgirl, and then sort of a payoff and the redemption of the character, the start of the redemption of Shayera Hall. So yeah, definitely 2 thumbs up for rewatchability for that one for me as well. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, if you subscribe to us on a podcast app and it allows you to give us a review, we would love for you to give us a 5-star review. Take a moment, tell the good folks at home what it is that you enjoy about the podcast. We would greatly appreciate that. If you're not subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, a lot of those other additional smaller podcast feeds as well carry us as well. So thanks to them. Don't forget, you can also, if you consume your podcasts via the YouTube, you can check us out. Our episodes debut every Saturday also on the Pod Tower YouTube channel. And not only do you get great content from us there, but you get great content from our good friends over at Tim Talk, and you get great content from our friends at the DCAU Watchtower database. So great stuff happening over there. If you can't support us financially by buying a shirt or a hat or a mug, which you can do by heading over to DCAUreview.com and clicking on the store tab. If you can't support us financially, which is understandable in this day and age, just go over, hit that subscribe button on the Pod Tower YouTube channel, and that will support us the best way you can. And it's free to do so. Liam, we have one Saturday left in the month of May and the month of magic. And since it is a 5th Saturday, that means that we are taking a trip to the Elseworlds to wrap up the month of magic. So let's talk about what we'll be reviewing next week.
That is right. We're taking a trip around the multiverse, arriving on the Elseworlds. This time, we're entering into a universe we have never touched before, and we are taking a look at I believe it's referred to as the DC animated movie universe, or the Tuckerverse, as I might like to call it. Either way, to wrap up the month of Magic May, we will be looking at the Justice League Dark animated movie. So very excited to take a look at that.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll get some John Constantine in there, which is a character that didn't quite ever make his way into the DCAU. So very excited to do that. Some Batman in there, as well as some of those other Justice League Dark characters. So looking forward to wrapping up the month of Magic May with a review of a DCAMU Tuckerverse movie. Can't wait, Liam.
Absolutely.
But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the very next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.